Dealing with the world is flat and economic development. That's number one. And there is a microphone just right over there they've shown to. So if you have a question for Mr. Friedman, please step to the microphone and ask that question. Thank you.
Oh, we can go on. Please go ahead.
That was fantastic. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Fantastic.
Appreciate it.
So, what happens in America now?
Can you tell me who you are?
Oh, I'm sorry. Eric Lieben. I'm a physician in the area.
Great.
So, what happens now in America, where we find ourselves in a very unique stage, but also have come from a very, very wealthy past?
Right.
We're living on debt. Our debt continues to go up and up and up. We're outsourcing everything.
Sure.
We're bringing folks into this country to do things for us that we don't want to do. Where does it leave us in a world which has become flat, but we haven't come to it from the same position?
Exactly. Good question. Thank you. Answer and then some micro answers how to think about it. I'm glad you asked that. When I wrote the World is Flat, 488-page book, the 1.0 version, I didn't interview a single person in Washington, D.C. I talked to Colin Powell about something else. He's in the book. Basically, I wrote this book without talking to anyone in Washington, D.C. And I live in Washington, D.C. As far as I'm concerned, the White House today is brain dead. Okay? Don't worry, this is not crossfire. No visible brainwave whatsoever on this issue. Congress, brain dead, okay? No visible brainwave whatsoever. As a physician, you would recognize that. But I had a very interesting time this last year, because while you all were reading the 1.0 version of the world, kind of getting depressed, I was actually working on the 2.0 version. And you know what I found? Washington is dead, but the country is alive. And you're the greatest example of that. And that is one great thing about this country, is because we have this really flexible, really free, really open economy, okay, that even when Washington is brain dead, California is not sitting around waiting for them to do energy. California is doing their own Kyoto Protocol. Okay? I wish I could show you my desk in Washington. I got a pile like this of letters from educators saying, please come to my school. Please come to my school district. I want to show you the experiments we're doing, the innovations we're trying. I got another pile from energy entrepreneurs. Come see my solar, my wind, my biofuel, my biodiesel. The country is alive. Because we have this flexible, free, open economy. So I said in my column this morning, in fact, I used to be a free trader. I'm not anymore. I'm now a radical free trader. Okay? Because when you have this flexible, free, open economy, where you'll have more people who will do whatever you can. I leave this year of working on the 2.0 version more optimistic than ever about my country. You know, they said, there's sort of the old saw there, that Britain controlled only the 19th century. America owned the 20th century, and China will own the 21st century. To which I say, not so fast. I'm not ready to cede the 21st century to anyone. We're not going to win it by default. We need things just like this, where people start thinking strategically about the world they're in, and they don't wait for Washington, okay, to tell them what to do. We're not going to win it by default. We're not going to lose it by default. My grandma back in Minnesota, she was a very wise lady. She used to sit by the fire in her rocking chair. And Grandma had a saying. Grandma used to say, never cede a century to a country that censors Google. There was just a little thing Grandma used to say. Well, she would be knitting. She'd say, Sonny, never cede a century to a country that censors Google. Do you know what a proxy that is for bad practices in a world where whatever can be done will be done? When you are censoring Google? So you'll pardon me if I'm not ready to see the 21st century, but we are not going to win it by default. We need to be really strategic about our strengths and how to nurture those strengths and prepare our young people, not just with more education, but the right education for the flat world. So let me just say a few words about that, because I know that's very much on people's minds. One of the things I really thought about a lot more in the 2.0 version was, what is the right education? You know? Well, to know what the right education is, first you have to know what are going to be the real jobs. So actually what I spent a lot of the 2.0 version doing was going around to companies and saying, what does she do? She seems to have an interesting job. And what does he do? And then I sort of collated them all together in my own just sort of unscientific, journalistic way. And I came up with what I call the new middle. You know, we know what the old middle class jobs were. Well, so I created a list of what I call the new middle. Okay? And I've got 9 of what I call the new middle jobs. Now, think of jobs as falling broadly into 3 categories. First are people who are really special and really specialized. Michael Jordan, J.K. Rowling, your brain surgeon, Madonna. None of them are going to be outsourced automated. They are so special or specialized. At the other end are people who are really localized and anchored. Your butcher, your baker, your candlestick maker, your nurse, your nanny, God forbid, your divorce lawyer. People who have to do their job in a specific location, face to face. And their jobs will be based on local market conditions. So one will be on global market conditions, one local. In between are a whole set of jobs that will be subject, to some degree or another, to outsourcing, automation, and digitization. I call these the new middle. And what you want to do is think about these job categories, because if you can focus on any of these 9 categories, there's a very good chance you'll be either so specialized or so anchored that outsourcing, automation, and digitization won't affect. So these are broad categories. And so the first category I simply call great collaborators. Great collaborators. Just think about it. If the world is flat and more things are going to be made in global supply chains of knowledge, service, and manufacturing, people who have experienced collaborating, they're going to be huge. There's a huge demand for them in the flat world. I actually started thinking about this 2 summers ago. I went with my daughter. She worked at a school outside of Bangalore. And on our way to school, we stopped at Infosys because I wanted to show her where the books are. And we were getting a tour of the Infosys campus, and the Infosys spokeswoman said along the way, Mr. Friedman, our interns heard you were here, our summer interns, and they wondered if you'd come speak to them. And I said, that's so sweet. I'd love to speak to your Indian intern. No, she said, our American interns. I said, you have American interns at Infosys? She said, yeah, we had 9,000 applications last year. Okay. This year I read somewhere they had like 13,000. They weren't all Americans either. They were from Germany, China, Italy, all over. So I said, I meet with these kids. So my daughter and I ended up having lunch with them because I really wanted to know who they were. Well, they were all business students and engineering students who understood their first job out of business school could be deputy assistant manager of India supply chain for Best Buy, for an engineering firm. And if they could show on their CV that they had experience collaborating, they were going to have a huge level. Great collaborators. Second category, and it was alluded to by the first speaker, great leveragers. People who can leverage technology. The only hope we have as a country, and you as New Haven have, of keeping our standard of living, is if we can constantly leverage technology so one New Haven resident can do the job of 20, as opposed to 20 people in China doing the job of 1. That means being really, obviously educated, to be able to leverage technology to do that. Great leveragers. Third category, great synthesizers. People who can take A and B and create C. See, when the world is flat, and there's so many more A's you have access to, and so many more B's, if you can put them together in what they call mashups, but this is a much wider application, you can mash them together to create C's. I mean, think of an obvious one in our life, the Apple iPod. What did Steve Jobs do? Steve Jobs took an MP3 player, put a white cover on it, created an online music store, and created the iPod revolution. That's the guy who knew what world he was living in. So he took A and B and produced C. He created a whole industry now out of it. I can give you millions of examples of this, but great synthesizers. Fourth category, great calculators. Anyone who knows calculus or above, why is math so much more important now? Because it all goes back to that first point I made. Because individuals are now authoring their content in digital form. For when your content is in digital form, what it means is it can be searched, it can be collated, it can be observed for trends and patterns now with algorithms. Okay? So math becomes so much more important. Of course, Google is just math. Okay, but not just Google. Now ad agencies are using math. Companies are using math to see which employees would work best together in teams. They actually track who you send the most email to. Okay? So there's millions of examples of these. Because once all our content is in digital form, it means it's searchable and sortable, okay, for patterns in so many more ways. So math becomes so much more important than when stuff was on paper. You could do it intuitively. You don't have to do it anymore. Fifth category I call passionate personalizers. People who can bring a personal, passionate touch to any vanilla task. Okay, vanilla is out. Vanilla is going to be outsourced, automated, or digitized. You've got to always ask yourself, what personal whipped cream chocolate sauce and cherry can I put on top? So I got to think about this by a guy who sells lemonade at Baltimore Orioles Stadium, Camden Yards. And this guy doesn't just sell lemonade. He's famous at Camden Yards. He shakes it, he does a jig, he stands on his hand, he gives you high fives, he sings a song. I always notice at the end of the game, he got a lot of tips, about 10 times thicker than any other vendor in the stadium, because he put a personal, passionate touch to a vanilla task. So I was at Orioles opening game this year with friends, and I was sort of there looking for the guy. I told him I'd put him in my book. He said, "Oh, haven't you heard? He now rents himself out for private parties." Is this a great country? And at another game, my wife and I, we met him, and I gave him my card, and he actually sent me his brochure, you know. Private, but that's a guy who took a personal, passionate touch on a vanilla task. The sixth category is anything green. Mom, Dad, tell your kids. When the world is flat, 3 billion new players all arrive on the playing field, all with their own version of the American dream, a house, a car, a toaster, and a microwave. Well, if we don't find an alternative way to fuel their future, we're going to burn up, heat up, and choke off this planet so much faster than even our corporate is. And that means clean power and green technology is going to be the growth industry of the 21st century. So green design, green consulting, green manufacturing, green services, there is a huge number of great new middle jobs that will be built around those industries. Seventh category, great localizers. Well, great localizers are people who understand the power of that global platform and start a local small business using it. The eBay entrepreneur is the simplest example. But it could be the garage owner down the street here who says to his partner one day, "Hey, Louie, look, we can get our hubcaps from Romania cheaper than we can get them from Rochester." Could be the sports bar owner in New Haven who understands, geez, when the world is flat, I can get 600 channels in here. We can have all kinds of flat screen TVs. We can show women's hockey from Japan. We can show volleyball from China. They're taking the power of this global platform and creating a local small business. Remember, local small business is where jobs get created. Eighth category, my hope for salvation, great explainers. Because when the world gets this complex, people who can explain and model complexity, there's going to be a huge number of jobs around this. See, if I can explain it to 10 and 10 can explain it to 100, do you know the leverage in that? So teachers, middle managers, a real estate agent who can do modeling on computers. Oh, you want to move the wall around there? No problem, we'll just do that. So people who can be great explainers, huge number of jobs in that. The last category is simply great adapters, people who can adapt from job to job to job. I built this around a woman, Marsha Lockery. I met her at EDS Systems down in Plano, Texas, for a Barroso company. And Marsha started there as a member of the technical. Today she's a systems engineer. And every single job she's had along the way has been either outsourced, automated, or digitized. Okay? She just stayed one step ahead of the pack man. Okay? By constantly adapting. Today she's a systems engineer and she still doesn't have her BA. She's been too busy adapting. Okay? And a lot of examples like her. So Gene Sperling, President Clinton's old economic advisor, has a nice way of talking about this. He says, you know, I don't know what you're talking about, Tom, it's not so difficult. Preparing, if you're a person for the job market today, it's like preparing for the Olympics. With just one difference. You don't know what sports you're going to enter. Okay. So if those are the jobs, then what New Haven has to ask and what Bethesda has to ask, well, what is the right education for those jobs? What are the skills you need to nurture, you know, in those areas to get people into those jobs? And I would focus on three things. First is the ability to learn how to learn. Because it's not so much what you know anymore, it's how you learn. Because what you know today is going to be outdated tomorrow. So it's really how we teach our kids to learn how to learn. And don't ask me, you have to talk to my wife, she's a teacher, how you do that. But that's really what the focus has to be, how people learn how to learn. So I was giving this talk out in St. Paul, my hometown, Minneapolis. The first time I gave it with a ninth grader, a young man stood up in the balcony, ninth grader, and said, Mr. Friedman, I'm a ninth grader, and really heard what you said about learning how to learn. He said, one question, what course do I take to learn how to learn? From the mouths of babes is a great question. As I was standing on one leg, I said, here's my simple answer. Here's what I would do if I were you. Go around to all your friends and just ask them one question. Who's your favorite teacher? And take their courses. No matter what they're teaching. Calculus, Greek mythology, American history, Russian literature. Because the first place you learn how to learn is by loving how to learn. And the first place, some of us are born with it, most of us get that from a great teacher. The only journalism course I've ever taken was in 10th grade in high school. From a teacher who inspired me to go into journalism. So obviously what that means for how we nurture teachers, how we reward great teachers, how we identify them, that becomes key important. The second thing you really need to, what is the second thing to focus on? In terms of, got it now. Can you really second one, honey? She's heard it so many times. Well, let me go to the third and I'll remember the second. Is that basically, my friend Dan Peake wrote this book called A Whole New Mind, you know, and Dan, the second one says, excuse me, I put this mathematical formula in the 2.0 version of the book. It goes like this: CQ plus PQ is always greater than IQ. Curiosity quotient plus passion quotient will always trump intelligence quotient. You give me a young person with a high CQ and a high PQ, I'll take them over the kid with a high IQ 7 days a week in a flat world. Because in a flat world, God, when you got internet and iPods, the curious kid can learn so much on their own. The passionate, curious kid can teach themselves so much. Doc Searle says, no one learns like a curious kid. I think in the flat world, that's really true. Last category, just sort of thinking about this, and these are just rough ideas, I'm not an expert on this, is that Dan Peake wrote this book called A Whole New Mind, and Dan basically says you have your left brain, you have your right brain, left brain, learning, repetitive, mass production, that's the side of your brain that took the SAT, you know, and right brain, synthesizing, storytelling, empathetic, creative, innovative. Dan basically says when the world is flat, everything on the left side of your brain will be done either by a computer faster or an Indian cheaper. So it's really a right brain world. It's a right brain world. Think of the jobs in New Haven that were based on mass production. You went from a bunch of shoe factories to biotechnology. You went from left brain jobs to right brain jobs. Well, if it's a right brain world, how we nurture right brain skills becomes very much part of the right education. So just to tie up this point, so I was working on books, I went around looking for one school, and there are many schools doing different innovations around these. One school that was really thinking about this, and that was Georgia Tech. And so I profiled Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech is a wonderful president, Wayne Clark, an engineer, very innovative. Wayne took over Georgia Tech in 1996. When he took over, graduation rates there was 66%. and which is terrible. They were actually proud of the fact they used to line up all the freshmen on the first day and said, look left, look right, one of you won't be here in 4 years. What a great way to inspire you. Look left, look right, one of you will be dead in 4 years. So we thought about that for a while, and eventually, on a whim, he decided to change the entrance requirements to Georgia Tech. He said a lot about it. He said, you know, the best engineers I worked with, they weren't always the smartest in the conventional sense. They weren't always the people who could solve the problem, but they were the people who could identify the problem to be solved. And so he changed the formula they used to admit students into Georgia Tech, and basically made it a requirement that to get into Georgia Tech, you have to either play a musical instrument, sing in a choir, be in a band, or play on an intramural sports team. And what was the idea? Because his idea was that people who are in orchestras, bands, choirs, and sports teams, he doesn't want a bunch of guys with slide rules locked in their room. People who play on teams and sing in choirs and are in orchestras are usually the first to ask for help and the first to give help. And in a collaborative world, that's really important. Today, 50% of the undergrads at Georgia Tech are in a choir, a band, a chorus, or a sports team. His biggest problem at Georgia Tech is finding recital rooms. This is not Juilliard. This is Georgia Tech. Okay? Graduation rates up to 80%, 79%, something like that. So, and what they then did was they completely revamped the computer science department also. Okay? Because what they did was they went out into the real world. So they went, you know, they're in Atlanta at Georgia Tech, so they went to CNN. They said, what does a computer scientist do at CNN? What do your computer engineers do? And they said, oh, our computer engineers manage content on multiple platforms. Internet, TV, you know, radio, whatnot. Interesting. So what they did, this is all in the 2.0 version, they actually redesigned the whole computer science major around 9 threads, they call them. And what they are synthetic threads. So to graduate from Georgia Tech, you have to complete 2 of these threads. One is on computer science and informatics. You study computer science and have to read Hamlet and take a course in screenwriting. Okay. So what are they doing? They're instead of waiting to throw you out into the world, where the first thing the employer says is, can you synthesize, can you do all this? They're actually building the synthetic skills into the students before they graduate. And they've got 9 of these. They're fascinating combinations, you know, of you're studying computers and human psychology, computer science, and you're studying robotics, for instance. And so they're building the synthesis. Now, Georgia Tech is responsible for training the AP science teachers for the state of Georgia. And they're now trying to push this down into the high schools because they know the college feeder system is completely broken. That's how they look at it. They're getting these kids who don't know anything this way at all, you know. So these are people really. That's why I'm excited, because it's not like the country's just sitting around there waiting for George Bush to tell them what to do. You know, people are out there. You know, I mean, really doing very exciting things. And I just end by saying that, you know, I travel around the world a lot, and I say to people, you know, I wish I studied education like my wife, and not Arabic and Middle East studies, because everywhere I go, education is the #1 issue. And you know what's really funny? Everybody thinks they're behind. Or you go to Singapore and they're nuts. They're dominating, aren't at all innovative. And they're right. Because how do you tell kids, don't chew gum, you throw your gum out on the sidewalk, you are in jail. Okay, and now we will have an innovation class for 30 minutes. Sorry, that doesn't quite work, you know. So we have a lot of advantages because of our culture of innovation, but we've got to nurture all these other things. So long-winded answer to a very short question.
Hello, Ginsberg. Tom, I work in the charitable sector here in New Haven, and appreciate everything you've had to say. I want to draw the connection. I think the question for us in terms of local economic development is about place. It's about this place,
Right.
And how we draw the connection between everything that you've talked about and what it means for us looking forward and this place. Bob Santee gave a very good presentation, as you heard, about new ways of thinking about this place in the framework that you're describing. But we still need to make the connection between these global trends that are flattening the world and this place. So I guess my question is, And educate, you were just saying education is obviously one way to do that. And having a superior education system is a total challenge. If we can do that, we will distinguish ourselves as a place. What other observations do you have about how to make the crosswalk between a particular place and, from what you know of our place, in particular this place, given its history, given its institutions, given its strengths, given its detriments, and all the things that you see that are flattening the world?
Well, there are, you got to get your infrastructure right. Bob's presentation said you've got, a lot of high-speed bandwidth here, but you aren't the easiest place in the world to get to, and that's really important. Yeah, I did a column a couple of weeks ago from Uruguay, where I wrote about how Tata, the biggest Indian technology company, has opened their their Latin American knowledge network. They built it out of Montevideo, Uruguay. Okay, so this Indian company came over to Uruguay. They employed 700 Uruguayan engineers, and from there they managed the back room of Bank of America. Yeah, I began the comeback with this famous cartoon from New York, where two dogs are sitting in a computer, and one dog says to the other, on the internet, no one knows you're a dog. On the internet, no one knows you're New Haven. Okay? No one knows you're Uruguay. So why did Tata go to Uruguay and not Santiago? Why not Santiago and not Sao Paulo? It's because there was a guy, Gabriel Rossi, who's a Hungarian Jew who grew up in Uruguay and wanted to do something for the country because they saved his parents from the Nazis. He was a former CIO, Chief Information Officer for Ernst & Young, and he brought Tata to Uruguay. Now every country in Latin America is sitting there thinking, why didn't we think of this? And you kind of got to be the same way. When you have an entrepreneur who has that sense of whatever can be done, will be done, and is being done, you really got to nurture that person with infrastructure, education, and governance. And also, I think it's very important about that environment. That's so relevant, it's very smart, because knowledge workers can live anywhere, so they want to live in a nice place. And that means environment and parks are more important than ever. It's not just a luxury you do afterwards. It's really central to how you. So all I can say to you is like more of all those things. I mean, gosh, the city that has Yale University at its hub, you shouldn't be scrambling. You've got to surround that with an infrastructure and a local education system and a governance system that can tease out of that school all the. A friend of mine was a consultant who worked for Siemens once said, Siemens only knew what Siemens knows. God, it would be a great company. Does New Haven know what New Haven knows? I don't think so. I'm just judging from what I saw. And you guys are sitting, what community in the world wouldn't want to have Yale in its bosom? And it doesn't quite seem like it's a fully connected in a way. It should be like the beating heart, of a regional economy, not just local economy. And that seems to be a lot more discussion about Yale. How do we incentivize Yale innovators and entrepreneurs to create local businesses? Are we doing enough to do that? Do you need an industrial park? What do you need by way of infrastructure, environment, so you can step out of Yale into the community and really drive ideas in business and entrepreneurship? So that's what happened with Stanford. Why Silicon Valley? Silicon Valley. It starts with Stanford University. Okay, there's a famous study about this. But Stanford's at the center of the whole ecosystem. You go around the Stanford campus, look at all the buildings are called. There's the Gates building, there's the Bechtel building, there's the, they're all named after, there's the Packard building and the Hewlett building and the Google building, and they are one and together. And so you really need to be thinking strategically. It seems to me just standing on one leg, about that, because if they can do it, why can't you? And if you don't do it, someone else will. And they'll do it with Yale people.
Internship with United Way. And my degree is going to be in anthropology from the University of Connecticut. I have not taken a lot of courses that are going to prepare me to work in this kind of new global economy. How do I now catch up to people that are either studying this right now, they have the base of it, or people who already know about it, because I don't have the experience out there, and I'm just finishing up with my time in college, so I feel like I'm in a weird place, and I don't know how to catch up.
You're dead meat. Next question. My daughter's here, she's saying, I'm really glad she asked that question. I'm going to give you a really honest answer. You've spent your time well, and I'm going to tell you why, and this is not for your benefit. I've been writing about this a lot. But let me start. So I was in India last year. I was the speaker for NASSCOM, the Indian High Tech Association's annual meeting. It was a great thrill. And my friend Jerry Rao, who runs a big Indian outsourcing firm, we were talking beforehand, and Jerry, we're going to go back to this education discussion. And excuse me, Jerry said, this in passing, he said, you know, Tom, more Americans will get PhDs this year in Sanskrit than Indians. And maybe that's part of our problem. Because we're great in math and in science, and we're all sort of focused on that, but we've forgotten our own culture. You know, and we're getting disconnected from that. So I happen to believe that liberal arts is still really, really important. And if you want just a little bit of inspiration, go home and Google Steve Jobs' graduation speech at Stanford 2 years ago. Because he tells a wonderful story. He dropped out of Reed College after one semester. And he had nowhere to go. So he stuck around Portland, and he took a course in calligraphy. And he learned the beauty and magic of typography, and it all went into the first Mac keyboard. And it was all about, you know, taking all these influences from the world, okay, and kind of bringing them together. I'm a real idiot in math. I mean, I'd be hopeless, you know. I can't do algorithms for Google, you know. But they have a lot of projects, you know, a lot of products that they need, and it requires, to do innovation, it requires great synthesizers. You may not be the one to do the algorithm. You may not be the one to solve the problem, but you may be the one to identify the problem to be solved. Okay? And I can't tell you how many companies I come across today who tell me, we like to train our own people. You know, it's much easier to train someone in technology who is, you know, got a kind of liberal arts view of the world than it is to take someone who's a sort of technologist and try to get them to be broader sometimes. And so there is a huge need, you know, for, I think liberal arts is really, really important. It's one of the great advantages we still have as a country. You know, that we do train a lot of people in these fields. Now, you know, connecting it up with your, you know, specialty, anthropology, what I would simply suggest is that it's probably not going to be, I mean, there's X amount of jobs for pure anthropologists, you know, X amount of teaching jobs probably, and X amount of field research jobs. But what I'd be thinking about is anthropology and science, anthropology and informatics. I'd be thinking about synthesis. Who needs my perspective with their perspective to build a third perspective that no one else will have? Okay, and that's really, so you really shouldn't think of, geez, I wasted my, I mean, I'm a BA in Europe and Middle East Studies. Everything I know about the flat world, I had to go and push those together sometimes. It really gives me a view of the Middle East that I think is, it may be right or may be wrong, but it's definitely mine. You know, no one else has my view. No one else looks at the region the way I look at it, you know, sort of connecting different dots. And I do that because I don't just come at it from one narrow perspective. And so really what I think, you know, if I were giving you career, it'd be that, how do I take what I have and meld it with something else? I mean, unless I'm going to be a pure anthropologist, But you learn a lot of skills, more than you realize in that in combination with other things may produce a third thing, you know, and that will be a real value add. Did you hear that?
Yes, my name is Frances Eckler-Morneau, and I'm a citizen of New Haven, as well as a citizen of the world. And I would like to congratulate you on the superb explanations you've given us today. I really agree with almost everything you said. And I see, as you bring us to the individual, I have a question related to that. Does that mean, since I think somewhat through the past we worked in a group situation, does that mean, due to individuality, we have to give up accountability?
I don't recall, sorry.
Well, let's just take a simple example. Yeah. In the outsourcing that has begun over the last 10, 12, 15 years, let's take the child toys, let's say Mattel or Hasbro or something. If that has been outsourced, if you begin to see, I'll say the last 3 years, the amount of recalls because of safety factor, that in the United States, we have spent a great deal of time building protections into the system. If this is now individuals outside of our
culture and norms, whatever,
who are doing, and therefore sending back to us anything, medicine, whatever, can we develop some of the same safeguards for accountability that we have had, and how we would do that?
I see. I think that's actually happening because they produce effective toys that blow up across harm. There will be a lot of backlash. So, and let's just I'll add a term for that. I call it globvolution, which is revolution from beyond. Where you can't necessarily develop the norms in your own society, but you basically import them from beyond. And I see that happening a lot. I mean, for typical outsourcing companies like Infosys, for instance, Infosys has 30% of its employees in America. Because if you're not close to the market and you're not close to your customers, not only will you not know what they need, but you're not going to be sensitive to where the market is going and how to service them and how to deal with those kind of areas and whatnot. So the best outsourcing firms, I would say 30% of it is located here. Maybe we'll just take one more and then we'll...
Pharmaceutical industry. My first comment would be, please do listen to your wife. She helped get you here. And you
didn't tell me your sister was here.
You provided some brilliant, cogent, and seemingly irrefutable examples and advice for individuals or individually acting institutions. My sense is that here we're trying to drive collaboration. Right. We're trying to say what happens in New Haven matters if you live in Meriden, if you live in Waterbury, if you live in New York. Could you give us some pointers on achieving that?
How to promote collaboration. Point of, you gotta know what the role is, and that's really what I try to educate myself on, first of all, and then try to share with others, And I'm constantly, I wrote the 2.0 version, I wrote the 3.0. Last week I was in New York, 10 days ago, with Nanda Dilkant, I was inspired the book. We had breakfast together. It wasn't sitting around saying make calendar, but we started. It was me badgering him at 7:30 in the morning at the Stage Deli. Nanda, where's the edge of the story? What are you doing now? Okay, that I need to know about. Where is the edge of the story? And so I'm constantly focused on what world am I living in. My job is to hopefully explain the world. So I don't stay right on that edge. I'm not going to be any good. I'm not going to give any value. And I'll get not outsourced, but take overlooked, as it were. So what did Nanda tell me? He said, well, Tom, the edge of the story now is that we understand that the way you build customer loyalty is no longer with service and price, it's with innovation. So what is an outsourcing firm like Infosys doing? They're saying, geez, we're sitting in the back, we own the back rooms of General Electric, American Express, Bank of America. We know in aggregate more about their information than anybody else. So we're now applying basically our knowledge to their business, and we're now driving our relationship forward, not on price and service, but by actually co-innovating with them. Because if I'm sitting on all your information, just imagine that, there were just two of us and I managed your bank account. And I knew everything about where you spent your money, what your budget was, and then I came up with a simple algorithm that I could actually show you on a graph, because I'm sitting on all your information. And they said, if you actually did this or that, there's a whole new business there. Well, in macro terms, that's what's going on. That is the danger at one level of all this outsourcing. Because they're not just sitting there saying, well, we'll do wage arbitrage, for 30 years. They're saying, now that I own your information, now I'm going to co-innovate with you on the basis of your information. So that's where the edge of the story is. And so, that's just to step back and to make that macro point again, that you really have to know what world you're living in. And you have to make sure that your elected representatives and your school superintendents and your teachers know what world they're living in. And even sometimes when it's a brutal shock. Because, and all I can stress to you is that I have enormous advantages of being a columnist at the New York Times. I have the resources of a newspaper, ask for a sabbatical, and so I'm not just like, someone who was working in a factory and that job gets outsourced and have to find another job. I really appreciate the great advantages I have. But at one level, I'm just like that person. See, I went to India and I realized my skills are out of date. I go back, I got my BA in Arabic and Middle East history. And so I had to learn all this other stuff in order to regurgitate it to you, but also to say, okay, the world has changed, and if I don't go back to school, all right, and update my skills, I'm going to be out of date. And so I'm doing that every day, and constantly making sure that I am sitting on the knife's edge of the sport, and that I'll never again be like that guy who went to Bangalore in January of 2004 and looked around and said, oh my God. I wish I could show you the outtake from our very first interview, which was with Jerry Robb, whose company does outsourced tax returns. And we shot the film, and the camera stopped, and I just said, Jerry, I don't understand this. I don't understand the platform which is allowing you to do this. And right then and there, I knew I was in trouble, And but it's the same for all of us as individuals, managers and elected officials. The only advice I can give you is it starts from knowing what world you're living in, because you can't take advantage of it if you don't know, kind of how it works, and if you're afraid of it, and you can't be afraid of it. You've got to be able to own it.